Okay, so hopefully everybody's still awake and everybody is still engaged. I am the last speaker of the day, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit more specifically about some of the capabilities that are going on at the Lawrence Livermore National Lab. Our panel talked about the broad capabilities, and Eric, Sarah, and Brandon did a really good job in covering a lot of the stuff that we're doing in climate tech. But I'm going to talk about a new capability that we're establishing to address the scale-up challenges of decarbonization technology. And this capability is called the Prototyping Enclave. But first, I want to talk a little bit about why scaling climate tech is such a challenge. And then I want to talk about how the workforce fits into that. Okay, so mitigating climate change is so difficult because in order to do it, the solutions to the climate crisis must match the scale of the problem. And currently, they don't. So to understand that, I'm going to give you two facts. The first is that the oil and gas industry is currently the largest industry in the world. The second is that in order to get to net zero carbon emissions, the direct air capture industry would have to be about 1,000 times the scale of the oil and gas industry. So that means these climate mitigation technologies have to be 1,000 times the scale of the largest industry known to man. Think about what that means for the science. Think about what it means for the materials. Think about what it means for the power and the utilities that are required to run these plants. All of the infrastructure and the pipelines that are going to have to move the CO2 and store it. The questions are daunting. So some researchers and technology developers tend to adopt the throw it over the fence mentality. Oh, I don't have to worry about these scaling challenges. The business will figure it out. But a lot of times the business can't address these challenges without a full understanding of the science. And so when everybody's not talking along the value chain, a lot of times deployments are delayed or sometimes they fail. So a lot of promising green energy solutions are facing these adoption challenges. So I'm listing a few of them here. Things like lack of markets and supply chain visibility, things like challenging economics. We heard about that earlier. Costs are a challenge versus the returns that you're going to get from your products. A lack of common infrastructure and commercial standards, as well as sometimes the technology doesn't perform once you get to these massive scales, as well as community opposition, unfamiliarity. We heard about that earlier today as well. So in order to actually mitigate climate change, we have to better anticipate these scale-up challenges. Everyone needs to be talking along the value chain so that we can actually deploy technology that can make an impact on the environment. So what exactly do I mean by this value chain? Well, a value chain is basically all the activities that are required to basically create a technology and then deliver it as a product to customers. And so it consists of these business entities like research and development, manufacturing, sales and marketing. And a lot of times scale-up challenges arise when new technologies do not address all the constraints along this value chain. So the new technology has to work in all of these different environments. After research and development, you have to show that the technology performs. Once you get to development marketing phase, manufacturing phases, you have to make sure that it performs at scale. You have to make sure the technology is manufacturable. You also have to make sure that it has clear distribution and supply chains. And once you get through all that, you have to actually make sure that you're actually delivering a product that the customer wants at the volumes that are required and demanded by the market. And so everybody has to be talking along this value chain. Knowledge must be transferred effectively. You also need support from organizations like finance and infrastructure. We heard a lot about policy and government, but we also need training organizations, education, as well as professional associations. These are the folks that are going to develop the workforce and define it. And the workforce is critical to getting these new technologies out. They're the ones that are actually going to be running these plants. And so when everything is working together along this value chain, you can scale effectively. But when it's not, it's very difficult to scale. And so at L&L, what we're trying to do is establish a new technology scale-up capability where we bring everyone together along the value chain to deploy climate tech faster with a higher likelihood of success. And so what we're doing is we're establishing a research program, but also a new facility. And so this facility is basically going to house a program that basically addresses value chain constraints during early phase R&D. So we're going to have the space and equipment to do large-scale manufacturing in wet and dry formulations, as well as materials manufacturing, as well as rapid prototyping and pilot plant engineering. We're basically going to bring together researchers and technology developers with folks along the value chain in manufacturing and sales and marketing to develop the technology together. We are also hoping that this will be a training ground for workforce development. We're hoping to get the local community involved so that we can bring folks in manufacturing as well as operators and technicians to learn about these new technologies as they're emerging into the market. So we're hoping if we work this way, we can work as one value chain to scale, we can avoid workforce silos, we can train faster, make decisions quickly, innovate, as well as adopt a systematic technology development approach. And so we're hoping this facility will be breaking ground no later than 2027, and it's going to be located in our Livermore Valley open campus. This is something that Eric mentioned earlier. He also mentioned the Advanced Manufacturing Laboratory. This is the part of the Lawrence Livermore campus that's located outside the fence, because this is where we can collaborate most effectively with our external partners. And so this facility is going to be located in a field behind the Advanced Manufacturing Laboratory. So the thing that makes this capability new and different is that we are trying to basically systematically adapt an approach to scale. And this is a technology development process. In industry, the technology development process follows these 5 steps more or less. The first 2 steps are where research institutions are most familiar with. This is basically fundamental research, and a lot of activity and funding goes here. And then the last 2 steps are commercialization, deployment, optimization. This is where the business gets involved. This is where you're putting steel on the ground. This is where you're starting up warehouses and things like that. So there's a lot of activity and funding that goes to that phase of R&D. But this middle phase, process product development, is a phase that's less known. So there's less funding that happens here. This is typically what's called the valley of death in technology development. And that's unfortunate because this phase is the most important to commercial success. This is the phase where you start to ask yourself questions like, does this technology, am I actually going to be able to manufacture it? Am I going to actually be able to train a workforce effectively with this technology? Once I scale it, is it going to be cost competitive? And if the answer to those questions is no, you go about redesigning the technology such that you can make the answer to those questions be yes. And so as you mature technology from the beginning of this phase to the end, you're basically scaling it up effectively. And if you do it right, you're actually going to increase your likelihood of commercial success. So this is the phase of R&D where we are going to locate the scale-up and prototyping enclave. So as I mentioned, we have a facility and we're going to have materials and equipment to do large-scale manufacturing so that we can actually figure out what are the right process technologies that we need in order to scale climate tech. But we're also combining this with a set of best practices that I'm showing you here. We're going to supply these best practices to PIs and technology developers to guide them across the process product development phase of R&D. So they fell into a number of categories. So in the process engineering and scale-up category, we're doing things like risk assessment, economic assessments was something Sarah mentioned earlier. We're also doing things like process simulations. When we get to advanced manufacturing, we're basically trying to combine computing with a lot of the work that we're doing. So edge computing, self-driving labs, things like that. And then when we talk about formulation and prototyping, we really want to do rapid prototyping. So 3D printing labs will be available, as well as pilot scale batch synthesis and formulation. So we're hoping that combined, all of this can provide a holistic, systematic, cutting edge approach to scale up, all under one roof. And we're hoping to execute this research program and these best practices in a way that supports a local ecosystem of workforce training, advancement, and development in climate tech. So we have been piloting this program already as a part of 2 active partnerships with DARPA and the UC. And we have found these best practices really do help to speed scale up as well as help to develop a future workforce in green energy. This symposium, as well as a Climate Entrepreneur Summer Students program that we hosted at the Lawrence Livermore National Lab this summer in collaboration with the Livermore Lab Foundation, is actually a direct result of this work. The folks shown on here are the PIs and the interns that were involved in maturing several different climate techs this summer, climate technologies this summer. They worked on things involving sustainable batteries, sustainable chemicals, as well as carbon capture. Some of the PIs and students are here today. They did an excellent job, and I hope some of you were able to catch the student posters earlier this morning. So that brings me to a summary and a call to action. So decarbonization solutions must be deployed at massive scales. To deploy at massive scales, we have to work as one value chain. The Scale Up and Prototyping Enclave program, we're hoping positions L&L well to bring together folks in the private and public sectors in order to scale technology as one value chain. And we are establishing best practices, partnerships, workforce training programs, and new methodologies to do this. But we also understand that this is just a drop in the bucket. We understand that there is much more work to do in the climate tech space. So we want to ask you for your help. Would your organization like to partner with us on workforce development and scale up of decarbonization technology? And if the answer to that is yes, please scan the QR code and let us know of your interest. That's going to bring us to the conclusion of this talk. I just want to thank everybody for your attention. And do we have time for questions? Okay, and I want to ask if anybody has any questions.
Tracie, how long does it take to go through the enclave process? Talk to us about, I mean, obviously every industry is different, every technology is different, but are we talking years or decades, or what's the vision for that?
That is a great question, Susan. Thank you. I would say it depends on what your organization wants. So we can work with you in a span of 2 to 3 months if you're looking for us to answer one specific question. If you want us to do a specific set of experiments, if you want us to do economic analysis or siting analysis or things like that. But if you actually want us to carry you across the whole entire phase of process product development, that's going to be more like 2 to 3 years. And we welcome those kinds of partnerships on either end of the spectrum. Anybody else have any questions?
I have a question that's really masquerading as a comment. Okay. Your first slide, you had the oil and gas industry. You had the oil and gas industry as the thing that sort of needed to be counterbalanced. There's a lot of logic to say you find ways to put them in the business of carbon capture, right? They have the pipelines, they know how fracking works. You know, Class 6 wells are basically fracking running backwards. So, leverage both sides of that. Are you thinking of ways to get this facility and the expertise, better connected with that oil and gas industry or the concrete industry? Concrete is often portrayed as a bad person in carbon, but really you just kind of run it backwards. It can be a phenomenal sink. There's nothing fundamental.
Absolutely. Yes, we welcome partnerships in the oil and gas industry. Total actually was involved in helping us to develop some of our best practices. We do recognize that the oil and gas industry has been around for a long time. They know how to scale. And so we want to leverage their knowledge. And they are interested in decarbonization technologies. So that was a great question. Anybody else? Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. That was a lot. I know. We're at the end here. I am Katie Marcel. I'm the CEO of Innovation Tri-Valley Leadership Group. And on behalf of our partners and co-hosts today, Livermore Lab Foundation, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, Startup Tri-Valley, and the Chabot Las Positas Community College District, thank you all for being here. Innovation Tri-Valley, ITV, is at the forefront, as we've talked today, of a $49 billion innovation ecosystem here in the Tri-Valley in one of the nation's fastest growing regions. As the only business-centered regional nonprofit focused solely on the Tri-Valley, ITV is powered by the region's biggest employers, top investors, and community influencers. And just like today's program, ITV brings together the business sector, government leaders, scientists, and educators to solve regional challenges, but also to contribute to global solutions. So we hope you were inspired this morning and that you leave energized and mobilized and are thinking about how you will contribute to this green revolution here in our region. And in the interest of sustainability, we do have food for you. So we have boxed lunches. So as you exit today, please take a boxed lunch to enjoy on your way out or somewhere on this beautiful campus. It's a gorgeous afternoon. And we hope you all have a lovely weekend. Thank you so much for being here.